All right, so I had some interesting thoughts about the law of attraction, and how we do tend to, it's interesting how we attract what we are actually like in life, and with what our relationship is like with ourselves is sort of like what we attract into our life in a lot of ways. And so what's interesting is how that works when what we are like is our blind spots, the places where we have an issue, or we have a certain characteristic that we put out of focus, but then we might draw people into our lives who have that characteristic, but in a way that isn't obvious to us how we're like that, because it's something that we're uncomfortable about. So we're uncomfortable about putting our attention on it to see where is this coming from. Why is this person who is like this that I despise in my life, why am I why is there some attraction to between these two people that doesn't seem to make sense consciously. But I was thinking about a man who was always complaining about this woman that he was working for and how selfish she was, and how she was sort of abusive and bossy and demanding and inconsiderate of him, and sort of oblivious to his needs and what his what he's actually like, and showing any consideration or concern for his values. So he had this person in his life that he worked for that was a constant source of irritation to him, and a constant topic of conversation that he would tell about people who would come to visit him. And what he probably didn't see that I did see, or that I saw in him, is that he was himself pretty indifferent to other people's feelings. He was pretty crass. He was all jokes, but all his jokes were mean-spirited and kind of at the expense of other people. And just he had a lot of anger that was just beneath the surface of his sort of crass humor, very pokey, very sarcastic, snide, kind of gross, over the top, and kind of boundary, sort of boundary crossing in a way that was like that. It was like a display of showing that he didn't, that he was not someone to be held responsible, because he's so off the beaten path that to expect him to be normal would be kind of unrealistic, to the point of now it's your problem for thinking that a crude man like him should respect anyone's boundaries. So it's sort of a way of offloading responsibility by being so obnoxious that it would seem unreasonable to expect him to be anything else. So So what do you have here? But one of his main topics of conversation is that he liked to talk about was how self-centered and obnoxious this woman that he was working for was. And so, back to the law of attraction, how we attract what we are, and how we attract the blind spots of what we are, and why, it is actually, the fact that we do attract what we want and we do receive what we want. It's just we don't always feel comfortable with what we want. So when we when we look at it that way, we can always find a reason for why people choose to stay in relationships with things that they claim to despise. And so if you look at this man and see what is this woman's serving him, what's the purpose this woman is serving him? Obviously employment, that's superficial, and he could be employed by somebody else. But the real attraction here is somebody who is so selfish that it sort of overshadows his selfishness. And even though he might be equally selfish, she's more like confidently selfish and sort of overtly selfish, because you could be covertly selfish and equally selfish. But this woman gave him sort of a shadow under which he could feel more comfortable with his own selfishness, because as long as he has this woman to talk about being so selfish, it sort of draws the attention away from his own selfishness, because people are going to be less likely to call him out on how he's obnoxious and selfish when he's complaining about somebody else being that way. And I think we all kind of know how this works, is we know that when somebody else is like complaining about something, and then we say, hey, wait a minute, like, you're kind of like this, that's going to piss them off, like, really, quickly. And so, most of us have an instinct to, like, avoid calling people out, especially on the topics on which they are sort of complaining about. And so it's kind of harder to call people out for the things that they complain about. So anyhow, I think I pretty much covered it here, so I'll leave it here.